Yo, peddlers, welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, Norby, and I hope you enjoy this next episode. Thanks a lot for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I would like to actually get started with kind of understanding a little bit your background, where you're coming from business-wise, personally as well, potentially, and how you got into paddle in the first place.
Sure. Really good good to meet you, and thanks for having me. My name is Christoffer and basically my background story is that I've been a tech entrepreneur for over 20 years. I've not worked with paddle for so many years. My entry to paddle was basically 4 years ago. And while I was working on one of my tech projects, I met a colleague that is named Magnus, and he had a really good idea. We were at a booming stage of paddle in Sweden, where no kids basically were able to play paddle
Because
all the arenas, it was really tough to get a paddle court time, and the only slots that were open was nighttime or very early mornings.
Okay, that was during the pandemic, or when was that?
That was actually just before, but then of course it got even worse during the pandemic, because the only sport in Sweden that was allowed during the corona was paddle.
Yeah, I heard about that, or we heard about that, because my main job is running a paddle center, and we had to close down for about 7 months. Nobody could play paddle, but we heard that in Sweden it's just going crazy, and the paddle is going even more crazy because that's the only sport you can play. So that was great for paddle, I guess, in Sweden.
Yeah. And so since I work in that environment, I'm a founder of a innovation center called Epicenter. We basically have like tech entrepreneurs with scale-up companies meeting larger companies, and there is a great innovation space. But when my colleague came up and said, I have an idea, because why does it have to be so tough to build and construct a paddle arena or paddle courts? And from that, basically, it was all about challenging the way courts are built today, and see if there were ways to make it a little bit easier. And that basically led to Instant Padel, because what Instant Padel is basically a court where you don't need major ground construction, and sometimes you don't need construction at all. The changes we did.
How's that possible? Going into that, just going into detail already on that. So, because I've built some paddle courts as well myself, so I know what it takes to build a normal paddle court. It's not great. Why is that, or how did you guys make that happen?
Yeah, so basically there's two things apart from the construction we have, is that the floor you're usually using is mondo grass, which is one type of floor that needs a lot of sand, and you need a base, whereas you also use glass panels, and only the glass panels weigh around 250 kilos.
Yep, they're heavy.
And what we did basically is that we changed the mondo grass to a floor that is from US called VersaCourt floor. It's a plastic clickable floor, assembling on like a 45 minutes. You can assemble it.
45 minutes, the whole court?
The whole court.
Wow.
And if you look at the glass panels, we changed to polycarbonate. And the polycarbonate only weighs 90 kilos per panel.
Okay.
And this means that 4 people can assemble our court in 4 to 6 hours.
Okay. Wow. That's game changing, I guess.
It's a game changing. And also, if you look at the construction of the court, we have legs on the side.
Yep. I've seen those,
make sure that the whole construction is robust.
Okay.
And there were, through the factory that we contacted regarding our idea, there was 3 major factors. Like, first of all, it needs to be a safe, robust construction. Second of all, we need to have functionality of being able to, move the court and transport the court. And the third most important element was the game experience. And when we got our court, the first court to Stockholm in March 21, we were both very amazed that we actually succeeded to come up with an idea that created such a good game experience, even though you have the plastic floor with the VersaCourt and polycarbonate.
Okay. So the gaming, the play to play on these courts is almost 100% similar to playing on a normal court, actually.
Yeah. So if you look at the position we have, it's all about, enabling paddle to all, anywhere and everywhere.
Yep.
And it's about moving on to recreational players to get them to try out the sport, play and have fun with the sport. And if you go to the 3% of the old WPT players, they require a certain bounce, a certain speed, both in floor and ball.
Sure.
But our target group, which is the dominant major one, they don't have the same requirements. They want to play paddle and have fun.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the bounce, we have a bit more better bounce than you have with the Mondo grass, depending on which venue you are at.
Okay.
And the polycarbonate, if you are a pro player and you smash it, from the serving line, you will of course notice that it's not kicking back exactly the same as glass.
Okay.
But it doesn't affect the game experience. So today we have had over 100,000 people playing our courts.
Wow.
And the response is overwhelmingly positive. And people are actually really liking the floor. It takes 5-10 minutes for them to get used to it, because everything, as soon as you come up with something new, you will always get questions beforehand.
Sure.
But when people walk into the court and start playing, they are really, really positive about the outcome. Very few even talk about the polycarbonate. They don't even
notice it. Basically,
no, basically not. And the ones that do, some people like it better when it's slower off the glass, and some people may not, but they adjust. Because as more elite player you become, as more you can adjust. Just like if you look at tennis, you have grass courts, you have clay courts, you have indoor courts. So today, and also in Spain, you have glass panels or you have concrete walls, right?
Yeah,
it's all about
old school courts are concrete, right? Still,
exactly. So pending the fact that we dared to change some of the materials, we all of a sudden got a product that is really portable. Like all the manufacturers today offers a mobile kit, but it's still a lot of construction that is needed to actually have it. But right now, if you come to a tennis court, we put it up in 4 or 6 hours and you don't have to do anything. And that is a very, for us, game changer, because just during 22, we have had over 80 installs in 10 countries. And people are truly really happy about the product.
Okay. And do you because of the side legs and the back legs, right, on the outside of the court, do you need to drill holes into the ground, or not at all? That just stays by itself.
No.
Basically.
So the plates on the legs, if they're connected and have contact with the ground, they are robust. You don't move. So that's why it's, of course, even for Instantpadel, it's important that you have flat, hard surface, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as the plates are onto the ground, you can't move it.
Okay.
For some windy occasions, like by the beach or high up in the mountain or the grass, sort of rooftops, you can semi-anchor it by drilling it in, or you can put weights on it.
Okay.
So there are ways to semi-anchor it, but for normal conditions, you don't need to. Okay,
cool. That's really interesting. Let's go into then some of the projects and some of the experiences that you have had, specifically some cool locations. I'm sure you've had some of them already. Sure. So let's talk about that. And after that, maybe go into some future projects if you can, if there's anything that you can mention.
Yeah. The funniest part right now for us, now that we have the product and it got proven and we have people that actually really likes it, that it opens up for so many new interesting projects. For instance, we say that if you have a chance to do a permanent court and you have the permit, you have the budget to do the cost, groundwork, whatever, we say do it. But we have learned that in Europe and also in Australia and other parts of the world, there are so many locations where you don't get permits.
Okay.
So therefore, as an example, we got into Gleneagles. So Gleneagles in Scotland is a prominent golf club.
Yep.
And they want to try out padel, but they didn't want to start off by destroying their tennis courts and heavy construction. So we put 2 courts at their tennis courts, just flat on, borrowing their tennis courts. And they had a great success with it, have now moved them inside for the autumn and winter.
Okay.
And now they're planning to do more with padel. So that's a great sort of way of how we have worked as a forerunner, enabling them to learn more about padel and then do a futuristic sort of plan.
Okay, so basically, for tennis clubs who are looking to try it out, see if people have interest, they can put one of your courts in there easily, and then if they don't like it, then they move it out of the way. If they like it, then they move it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of political discussions because the senior members or a lot of members at tennis clubs are sometimes very reluctant to the new sport, whereas half of the member side, if they're younger or older, doesn't matter. They are like, hey, let's invite a new sport, like we did with squash in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So we are getting into sites and places where they don't have to make so many decisions permanently. Yeah. They can actually try it on and learn and get the ones that are reluctant to become more positive.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great idea, actually.
We also got invited by Soho Club Babington in London.
Okay.
Whereas they now have, I think it's a 2-year, because they don't know how long permit they have. And that's why it becomes, tough for them to make that type of permanent decision. But we have 2 courts there, which is, of course, really fun because it's a great crowd to be seen and for a brand building purpose.
Sure.
But if you take that as another type of example, because it's not about us being towards the high end market, it's more about also unlocking dead community areas. Okay. One example in Stockholm, for instance, you had an old parking lot under a bridge. And with suspect people during the night walking around, and it was like dark area, right? But then due to the fact that we could have our instant paddle courts there on a season-based level, we put 3 courts on that parking lot and turn it to a family-oriented fun activity center with a focus paddle.
Okay.
So what we are working with is with communities in school, how to unlock dead community areas, with real estate companies, how to give back or awake a sort of social fun and health to their living areas. We can work with hotel and recreational areas to add something. I mean, a golf club or an hotel, they would be happy to have a paddle court, but they don't know if they can have it all year round or what they're going to do the next 2 years with that area.
Basically, you're supporting these communities and the hotels and the clubs to try it out, add value to their clubs with taking less risk as if they were to buy 2 courts or 2 normal courts, right?
Yeah, and in many cases we have become market builders, like forerunners to enable paddle, but also that a lot of these courts that we do sell, they stay. They stay for a purpose because they have become a very good, interesting spot for.
And they don't change it to regular courts, or do they?
No,
generally.
So some of the projects will do that most likely in the future, especially entering UK now and Australia. Okay. We have many projects similar to that, but in Sweden there's many permanent places as well, because
using your courts
for permits reasons, as soon as you can say that you can also remove it, they handle the permits more easier than saying that, hey, I want this 10-year lease forever and I'm going to do all the ground construction. So it depends from the market to market, from country to country, sometimes from person to person. But another example is in Germany, where our local distributor, Paddlbox, they closed the deal together with the Hockey and Tennis Federation. They have, on and off season, they have so many locations in different communities where you can all of a sudden activate, for instance, the tennis courts that are not being used so much. Like somehow it feels like we can be part of many projects where we basically say that do your inventory of space. Where you can't build a traditional court for numbers reason, you now have a great alternative to check out instant paddle possibility. We're moving in paddle more to the central side of things, because in Europe, you always have to take a drive like 10, 15 or 20 minutes to a warehouse. But all of a sudden with our solution, you can become centralized. So we can have a lot of courts in the city center. So you can actually go to play paddle instead of always have to drive to play paddle.
Okay, cool. That's pretty. Actually, when I heard about you guys, I think at our club someone mentioned your company, and then I started looking into it, and I thought it was pretty cool. But now that you're mentioning it, it is really cool way to grow the sport. And I think right now most people who are in the sport, my goal, your goal is to grow the sport first, right? Right now you're still at the very beginning. That's the reason I'm doing the podcast. That's the reason, blah blah blah. And I thought that's great. That's a great way to grow the sport. So I thought it was very interesting now that you're mentioning all these cases and all these interesting things. My mind is going boo boo boo. That's great.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
And the thing is also, I mean, with the Westfield experience in London, I mean, in the center of London, largest shopping center in Europe. Yeah. And in 1 year and a half, a lot of different court types was presented, but they were not allowed due to many restrictions.
Okay.
We got granted in 3 weeks.
Okay. In a mall, in a shopping mall, in the middle of a shopping mall in London. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. And it was with Andy Murray and a lot of prominent players.
Yeah.
And it was a huge global success because everybody knows about that type of activity we did. And that helps, the paddle as a sport to grow as well. Of course,
100%. Okay, very cool. And I mean, we haven't talked about it. Now that leads into my next question or topic. That would be, so far, I mean, you mentioned tennis clubs, a mall in London, golf clubs. Who are your main target audience so far and in the future? Are we talking about private people? Have you done any private, so rich people kind of things, or more maybe city councils, or about the tennis clubs or golf clubs?
Yeah. So what's happening right now, since we are pretty young still, but we're getting recognized, we're getting, enough proof points that people now starts to really validate us as a really good player. The most talks we have now is with larger operators that wants to speed up the growth of paddle and use it as an addition way. For example, it takes like 1 year and a half to build an arena. But during that 1 year and a half, they understand that they can actually use us to build up a community and the interest for paddle. So the occupancy rate gets faster on a higher level when they open.
Yes.
And then also we have lots of talks with retailers as well as real estates, because there's a lot of
retailers, meaning shopping malls, or
like basically real estate companies, but that has a retail problem, or that has a lot of space due to different facts of the way what's happening right now.
They can rent it properly. Can use it.
And they all of a sudden have a lot of space, but they don't necessarily want to become an arena, but they want to strengthen their offering of creating activities around their own premises. We're having also not so many private persons, to be honest. Those few, because you do need a pretty much space, but they can usually build a permanent court. So there's no private sector that we are like talking to every day. It's more about schools, municipals, different type of govern to. I mean, now that they see us, and especially in the UK, there's so many spaces that is not used correctly, and they want to really get kids in and families to try out the sports.
Yeah. Cool. So the next question would lead into how can I, or how can the community of the listeners help you guys reach some people, or help coming some projects, some business your way?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it would be great for people to join our communities at social media, of course, on Insta and LinkedIn and Facebook or whatever, just to show, basically follow what we're doing, because we have a lot of cool, interesting projects that, if you like it, you can share it, and you can tag people, you can just spread the word. And I think also it's about when you're out there and you're an entrepreneur, you're passionate about the sports, and you want to do things, don't stop by getting turned down because of permits. Look an extra way to see how you can also contact us and see if there's a potential through us. So the yesterday's no to a landing or to a land or to an aerial space is today maybe or yes. Thanks to Instantpadel. So I mean, be part of the paddle movement. We are basically working with everyone. We are having one rule at the company, that's non-asshole policy. We want to have fun, we want to build with passion, and we want to make sure that everyone gets to play the game of paddle.
Sure, of course. And one actually important thing that that's going back into the setup and stuff like that. So if I were to order one today, what would be the timeline until I have it in my backyard? Yeah,
so we have invested in a large stock in factory in Alicante in Spain. So basically, it's all about the transport company that can send a truck from Alicante to the address. And then it's about build up. So I would say 1 to 3 weeks,
Okay.
depending on where you are in Europe.
Yeah, you can have a record. Okay, very cool. That's not
Yeah.
long at all. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, I'm actually pretty excited to be chatting with you about this, because I have the feeling that it's actually gonna help grow the sports tremendously, and I think it's a great idea you guys started and brought to life. Let's finish with one last thing that I would be very interested to hear. You mentioned you have an entrepreneurial background. You've built businesses before. You have a great co-working space or a hub where people with startup ideas come and work, and you can help them with the area. What have been some of your learnings and lessons throughout your career as an entrepreneur that you can share to a younger generation to help them if they would like to be self-employed or entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah. So my number one would be do than just thinking. So if you have an idea, trust your idea and start it out. Try it out. You never know where you land. When I started Instantpadel, I had no clue that it was going to be this success. This was a fun project at start. We were curious, but we did something that helped us. We did it. And then we can scale from there. And we have changed a lot of things during the way, and we are getting and we're learning every day. Okay. So you have to be sort of curious. You do before you not only just think it, do it. Another thing I would say is make sure that you are surrounded by great people that you really like and trust. Don't think money on try to have quick wins. There's very, very few that make quick wins. Building up a business, whatever you do, it's always going to take time. But I mean, you might as well just have fun, during that time. So don't take shortcuts. Do it and gather people that are basically supporting the things or skills that you don't have. But make sure that there are no assholes.
Yeah, that's very important. All right, so have fun, do it, don't think, do it, and enjoy.
Yeah, and collect your dream team and be open to change along the way. But I mean, you will always regret if you don't do it.
Right. That's what they say, and that's what I try to kind of live by a little bit. You regret the things you didn't do, not the things that you did do most of the time. Sometimes you regret the things you did do as well, sometimes, but not more. You regret more the things that you didn't actually do.
Yeah, and sometimes also to gather too much information and get stuck can scare you away. Because if I would have known how tough this was, when it comes to all the things that I didn't control, supply chain and getting everything together, I might have not followed it through. But sometimes I think it's good to be naive, but always also curious about turning into an expert. So the journey between being naive, curious, but then make sure to become an expert is a very fun journey if you're connected with the right people.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And hopefully the younger listeners and the people who also thinking of opening their own business and doing something, whether that's padel or whether it's anything else, they'll take that into consideration. And for me, it's definitely the doing part is definitely one of the most important for me as well, because without that it's impossible, and I appreciate that. So
and I'm open. I mean, people can contact me. I love meeting people. I love ideas. I know exactly when I can give advice or not, or if I know anybody. But I mean, it's about collaboration and basically giving and sharing. I think that's the key, instead of block people off. So if you really have a good idea, don't hesitate to contact me.
All right, awesome. That sounds good. I'll obviously put your credentials and Instantpadel into the video and into the podcast when we go. But Christoffer, thanks a lot for joining me on this episode of the podcast. And hopefully we can actually keep in touch. And I think Instantpadel has a pretty good chance of being a big success, and I'm looking forward to supporting that if I can in any way.
Yeah. I mean, really, really nice and really nice talking to you. I enjoyed it. This was my first podcast, so you always have to have your first one, right? So definitely, this was a good start.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm happy I could be your first one on this one. Awesome. No, that's cool. Thanks a lot. I mean,
take care, man.
I will cut the podcast now in the real time, but again, thanks a lot, Justin, just between the two of us as well to that you did this, and I'm glad I could be the first one. But let me know if there's anything I can help. I'll I'll keep my eye open as well. There's in Switzerland, as I said, I'm running a padel arena with 8 courts. We're doing construction in July as well because our roof is too low and we need to make higher roof and so we're doing a big construction there. And I'm always into getting padel on there and more. So I'll keep my ears and eyes open, and if I know anything, I'll recommend you or I'll get in touch with myself. But yeah, from your side, if you have any projects in Switzerland, or if you will have any projects in Switzerland and you need any kind of advice or whatever on how things work here in the country, then more than happy to support it as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right,
thanks
thank
a lot,
you very
man.
much.
Have a good one, huh?
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Ciao. See ya.